Welcome back to Between2Bs, the official podcast of the B to SMB Institute and our 5,000 plus business to small business professionals. Sangram Vajre, named one of the top 21 B2B marketing influencers in the world, is our guest on the latest Between2Bs podcast. Over the course of 2 successful exits of more than $100 million each, Sangram has been teaching the business of marketing with his signature frameworks. His bestseller, Move, focused on creating and executing effective go-to-market strategies at any stage of a business's life cycle. Sangram's framework is more than a guide. It helps you and your team, move. Always a fun ride as we go big and sell small on this week's Between2Bs podcast.
If you sell at scale to small business, you need to be here. The 7th Annual B2SMB Institute Leaders Forum, May 14th and 15th in Sonoma, gathers business to small business executives from dozens of major brands to talk shop. The winning, keeping, and growing of SMB customers. Our 2025 B2SMB Institute Leaders Forum extends the central theme of our 2024 events, selling successfully in a small business marketplace that's seen extraordinary growth and change in the last 2 years. Combining keynotes from B to SMB sales superstars with frequent small-sided breakouts, the 2025 Leaders Forum presents research-based insights, best practice playbooks, and a steady dialogue of shared wisdom on winning, keeping, and growing SMB customers. Our B to SMB Institute Leaders Forum sold out these last 2 years, so it's not too early to save your spot at our top-to-top networking and strategy exchange for senior B to SMB execs. Get your tickets today at b2smbi.com/leadersforum25. Are you ready to master the new sell? Join us for the 6th Annual Leaders Forum in Sonoma, hosted by the B to SMB Institute. Tickets now on sale for the B2SMB Institute 2025 Leaders Forum. Members attend free. Email info@b2smbi.com for more information.
Sangram Vajre, welcome to the Between2Bs podcast. I have been looking forward to this since I just learned about you just a few weeks ago, and we've already had a couple of great conversations. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, absolutely excited for it. Excited to see you at the big event that you're putting together. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I really sincerely plan to, Dave, think through and come with some original content and original ideas, because I think things are changing so fast is that whatever we talk today, by the time we get to the event, they'll be like, okay, that's old news. What's new?
I know. And as all of the speakers that, we're lining up, I'm telling them, look, don't rest on whatever we talked on today. Just basically continue to read the news and, formulate your opinion. But before we dive in, because I think we've got some fascinating topics that springboard off your bestseller, Move, which I read when it came out. I read it again, and it's just such an impressively crisp playbook on how to go to market and how to improve your go-to-market playbook and strategies and executions. But give us some background on you and how you're one of those people that I like to describe as you've learned as much from your failures as you've learned from your successes and vice versa. So give us kind of the thumbnail of your career.
Yeah, and probably more from my failures than success. Success is a lousy teacher. That we all know that really well. Once you get it, you actually really understand it. And failure is, you want to be a student of right. That. So I've always felt that to be true. And I have a probably very unconventional role and career path. For the most part, I ran marketing at the closest that I can get to align on all of this is, after my master's from Alabama, we were talking about Alabama before that, I was trying to figure out what's next. And I got this role at Deloitte at that time. I don't know if you remember, 2002, there was Sarbanes-Oxley, SOX compliance, and Ron kind of fell off, and there was all of these things where nobody could really trust all these big companies and all their financial and all the fiduciary responsibilities. So they literally came in and hired anybody who could speak English or write English, and they said, you're going to be an auditor. And we all became auditor at this big giant company. Now, I still remember this, Dave. This is so interesting. This actually ties back to what I'm doing now. There was a time when I was working through certain things at Deloitte, and I was getting creative around how to talk about some of these numbers. And the guy said, hey, look, dude, this is not marketing. Don't get creative around numbers. And, that was my telltale sign that this is not the lane I need to be too long. Right. But that led me to fast forward a little bit, ran marketing at Pardot. That got acquired by ExactTarget. And at that time, Pardot was one of the marketing automation companies, but was right about 10 million, and we got acquired for about 100. And then 6 months later, ExactTarget got acquired by Salesforce for 2.7 billion. So all of a sudden, Dave, I went from this early stage startup marketing leader kind of person to this half a billion dollar company, ExactTarget, running a big portfolio of revenue, to this now $10 billion company and I'm like, no idea what's going on and how fast things are moving and how big things are. There's lots of lessons that we can go into it. But that was a great time. That was a great learning. I think I learned a lot about product marketing, about brand building, about messaging, positioning. At Salesforce, this was like an incredible PhD in a couple of years over there. And then I started a company called Terminus, which really was around account-based marketing. Even that came out of a reason, because at Salesforce, there was a conversation I was having with my sales leader, and we generated like 3,000 or some leads, I think 13,000 or something like that month. And the sales leader came to me and said, well, Sangram, you and your team did phenomenal. Can you generate another 2,000 leads? And I'm sitting here thinking, why are you asking me to generate more leads? We just had a record month of leads. And he said, no, you just go do that. I'm like, well, what about pipeline? What about converting more? What about expansion? I was asking all these questions. And this is 2013. And he's like, no, dude, I'm just telling you, like, he was just direct with me more, like, all right, like, hear me out. Like, just give me more leads. Dave, that was the point when I thought that, man, I'm a coin-operated lead machine.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be that anymore. Yeah, totally. That led me to start a company called Terminus. I'm like, there gotta be a better way. And account-based marketing became a thing. Like, how do we focus on accounts and all of that as opposed to just leads? And that's why we started this company called Terminus that then got acquired by a PE firm. And along the way, I wrote a couple of, like, 2 books on ABM. And then the third book was Go to Market, because I started to look around down the lane. It's like, where is everything moving? And I could see in 2020 or so that, man, even ABM is a subset of a bigger idea, which I thought at that time was around Go to Market. And then that's where the Move book came about.
Yeah, and I think that probably the recognition that ABM is just a derivative of go-to-market. It's one aspect of, something that fully integrates the enterprise. Everybody has to touch it, and everybody has to play a role in kind of that forward view of go-to-market. So let's kind of dive in, and I came up with, like 8 or 10 questions from reading the book a couple times now. But I wanted to inject into a dialogue with you and an explanation of many of the tenets of the book, with a recognition that AI has become an enormous, it is the elephant and then some in the room of virtually every conversation that everyone is having right now in enterprises' product development, in their marketing, in their selling, in their servicing, in their retention, in their expansion, in their acquisition. I mean, it just creeps into everything. And I think that there's 2 things at play at once. One is the thrill of, oh my God, look at what this thing can do. And then there's also the, oh shit, look what this thing can do. And those 2 things in combination, I think you actually very ably addressed in the original Move. Yeah. And so what I wanted to do is kind of ground you as question number 1 is basically, how do you see AI potentially reshaping traditional go-to-market and, as a subset, ABM, all those things, how we sell and how we actually bring to market our products and services? What is AI doing to that right now?
Well, it is definitely elephant and then some, maybe the whole jungle, if you want to bring that to bear. the way I describe this, Dave, or at least have wrestled with it and put my mind at it, and I'm spending at least 1 to 2 hours a day figuring this thing out right now and trying different things and breaking models. I'm putting myself in master classes that I have no business being in. I could just sit back and just do what I need to do, but I'm becoming a student of like what this is. I'm meeting with every Friday I do on a session with this guy who's running this university AI thing. Like, where is this LLM going? How can you create your own AI thing, right? Like, all of these are just possibilities are endless on it. And the way I describe it to myself and the people that we advise and work with is that AI is the new internet. Just have to look at it that way. I don't know if anybody has ever said that or not, but that's how I phrase it. It's not an add-on. It's not a bolt-on. It's not a let me try figuring this one small piece of it. No, it's going to be just like the internet. Like, can you imagine now not doing anything or doing anything that does not have internet, and you would be hard-pressed to find. But if you go back 20 years, when the first time Amazon came out, everybody was talking, probably sitting in their coffee room table and saying that, man, can you imagine all the brick and mortar? What about the bookstore down the street, right? What about
this is going to destroy?
Destroy everything, right? And so we all probably had that level of panic at that time. If you can take some time back, or when horses were gone, and then Henry Ford said, like, let's just have cars now, and people like, what? Wait a minute, I have 1,000 horses. What do I do with all these, right? So we have to go back and think like, this is normal. This is what we're supposed to do. This is where we are supposed to be, and just get a grip of it at that point. Like, it's just the new internet. You just have to reimagine all of it. And the best part, Dave, and going back to the book and everything, is that I actually was having this conversation with Brian, my co-founder and co-author on this book. Man, if we were to rewrite this book, what would we do? What would we change this? And we actually spent a good amount of time, and Dave, we wouldn't change a thing. And here's why: because the book and what we're trying to do is, it literally talks about this, the questions that we need to think about. It's a transformation that we need to have. Go to market is not, okay, what do I do here, there? No, it's about changing the way you think about your business and moving that forward. That you still have to do as a human being. Now, the execution of that is going to be at a pace that one could have not imagined 3 years, 4 years ago. It is as fast as you possibly can imagine, if not more.
And is expansive, all of those things. And those 4 questions, just to be clear, that I think, I hope I articulate these correctly, but, you guys really were focused on 4 key questions in the book. And the first one was market, understanding your market. And the second one was understanding your offering. You can't have a go-to-market unless you actually have an offering. But then you really talked about 2 things that, to me, were the most important parts of the book, and it was really velocity and expansion. And I think that velocity and expansion feel like, in some ways, AI is almost dictating those to us.
Yeah.
So as you work with B2B companies, and you're talking to them basically about the traditional things you talk about with go-to-market, the buyer journey, and you're talking about basically all your sales processes and your people and your touch points and all this. What do you offer them as kind of your core advice on how to, on those 2 specific questions of arguably the tail wagging the dog of AI really dictating velocity and expansion?
What's interesting is, so let's just take the market question for a second, right? Like, where can you grow the most is really, really the base level question. And that's super important. I think in many times, most people ask the wrong questions. And I've done that almost 20 years of my career. I feel like I've been asking the wrong question. The question like, where can you grow? That's a horribly bad question. And here's why. Right. You can grow in any way. You can be a paper boy, and you deliver and do landscaping. You could do like 50 other things, and you can grow in any way possible. That's not the question. The real question is, where can you grow the most? Meaning profitably at scale, where it actually, the revenue makes sense to you. The team can actually, all of those things. So the layer of clarity that we started adding to these questions started to be really, really important. So that's the big question. Where can you grow the most? And when you add AI to all of these questions, what's interesting is, initially, to answer that question, you would say, all right, I need a team who can go and do some digging and look at our cohorts and look at what our customer sentiment is, what the research is. Now you can do that in an hour. Max.
Right.
You can literally teach an LLM who is connected to all of your CRM data and pull out what are the best characteristics of all these companies, look at all the latest research on all these companies, what are the predictable AI signals around it, why did they buy at that time. You can look at all of it and then some to actually have a really good, crisp understanding of, okay, why should we continue to market about this or not? So I think what's interesting is the questions remain the same, but now the speed at which you can actually get those answers are mind-boggling. And you would need an army of people and still not have perfect answers or good enough answers. So now AI would give you good enough answers in less than an hour. It's unbelievable. And as a matter of fact, what's even more interesting is one of the questions around this about velocity and expansion, especially, that came from a conversation with Scott Dorsey, who was the CEO of ExactTarget. Initially, the E wasn't expansion. For me, E was experience, and it was market operations, velocity, and experience. And when I was talking to Scott Dorsey, he was the CEO of ExactTarget. He's the one who sold ExactTarget to Salesforce for $2.7 billion. And he was one of the people I interviewed for this. And he said, Sangram, I think there's something very wrong about this. I'm like, what is that? He said, your E, the experience sounds good, but it's not actually practical. Your experience is going to be default. Like it doesn't matter. Your customers are going to dictate that better experience every single day. As the thing that keeps me up as a CEO is, where can we expand our business? Should we go in a different location? Should I buy companies? Should I put more money and do agencies and have them give the software to deliver this much faster? Should we do partner program? Like, these are all the things that keeps me up every single day as a CEO. And I want my go-to-market team, my executive team, to be thinking about this all day long. So to me, that's all transformative thinking. Every CEO today, every executive team is thinking about all of it. Now, AI can help you figure out answers to those questions. But Dave, how are you going to make a knee-jerk reaction? Even if AI told you, yeah, you should do more partner program, somebody still has to take the time to think or, figure out how do we do this and spend that relational capital to make those things happen. That thing is not changing, and I don't think it's going to change.
Yeah, and I think that's why I always do believe that the kind of the knee-jerk reaction that AI is going to somehow replace all of these different capabilities or tasks that humans have to intervene and do, quote, intervene and do. Of course not. It's not. It needs that. They still have to execute the plan, right? And that execution requires its own set of challenges and talents and thinking.
But here's what excites me the most, though. This is what and I love to hear what excites you the most. Here's what, and I was on a thread this morning, so this is like fresh in my mind as this conversation is. Somebody wrote about this, every so often, oh, yeah, it's going to take all our jobs and all of this thing. Like, just like people who had horses, like saying that, oh my gosh, now that's all I needed was I knew how to keep these horses and, polish this thing. And my businesses. Yeah, like, what is it? It's so crazy. It's literally the same. If we could get our brains around the fact that this is the same exact conversation when Henry Ford came up with his car, like automobile industry, like, what am I going to do? Like, it's the wrong questions. You're not asking the right questions, right? So this whole internet thread, people are going to lose jobs. And I try to write comment on that one in the most positive way I possibly could, other than saying that you need to get off your horses. Like, that's literally what it is all about. Is this idea that this is literally going to be helping us to get back to what we as humans are good at. We are good at storytelling. That's how we connect. We're good at problem solving. We're good at connecting the dots of what this all could mean with all of its stuff. We are really good at creating thoughts that actually bring something new in the world and start looking at it. We're not looking back. We can start looking at the future. We can start looking at possibilities. So it's almost like, okay, well, you want to go back to dark ages? Well, why don't you just walk next time to whatever next city you want to go and do presentation? Like, you wouldn't do that. Instead of being on a phone call, why don't you? Nobody would go back and want any other way. So as soon as we can get off our horses and come back to this idea that, okay, so all my research is done. And once I create a video, 15 other shorts of that video will automatically happen. So I can now focus on the best conversation that I can have and tell a story, connect the dots, think about the future, the possibilities. I'm so excited about that because that's what I think we're good at. And we have been, everything we do, we can look at almost 60, 70% of the work we do is actually grunt work that we shouldn't be doing, that we don't think is grunt work because we don't have an option B today.
Right. And you know, back in my prior life when I was a copywriter in my early stage of my career, at least, you know, I had a great mentor who basically said, look, the challenge is not writing, the challenge is editing. That's the work. And that's the real work. Creating is fun. I mean, you can just throw stuff against the wall and have a good time, but editing is hard. It's grunt work. Well, you asked what makes me excited. So, and by the way, just as a sidebar, your next book should be entitled "Get Off Your Horse." It's a variation on "Move" because it really is. It's so true. Our history is so filled with moments when in time when we really found it difficult to get off the horse. But I'm not sure excited is the right word or aggravated is the right word. I get aggravated by how badly the value proposition of AI features, capabilities are articulated, and it doesn't seem to really necessarily matter the category or the product. It is very oftentimes, it's not actually explained very well. There is no story behind it, really. There isn't kind of something that dissuades fear or misgiving. Very oftentimes, especially small businesses will say, I'm not impressed. You know, okay, great. You know, you helped me figure out my wait staff schedule at a restaurant. Thank you, AI. You know, basically, now what? You know, what's the next thing you're going to do that actually is going to grow my business? Yeah. So how do you advise your clients on articulating the value proposition that is so inclusive of AI and its features and capabilities?
You know, AI has an incredibly beautiful way of showing, like, the products, AI products look good. Like, you know, when you think about building a product, most products in the last 10, 15 years, they look really, really bad because somebody was trying to figure it out what needs to be done. And then over a period of time, they got better. AI, on the other hand, has this incredible promise right off the gates, like, oh, it looks beautiful, it looks seamless, it looks easy. So the products actually look really, really beautiful, but they are superfluous at its best. They really are not doing much more, like, as you said, than very basic things, or at least what people are figuring out right now. And it has the power and the promise of doing incredibly well things. The question still remains is, like, you know, I'm doing this right now. For all of our advisory research work, we're building our own LLM and saying, all right, if somebody should be able to come to us and they ask all these questions around, hey, where can we grow? How do we create market investment map? What should be a ramp around X, Y, and Z things? Here are the 5. What are the different ways to expand your business? And what are the templates or frameworks to do that? So we get these questions all the time. So we're like, we have all these answers. We have done it. We have hundreds of recordings of it. So we're feeding this LLM so somebody could actually say, put a prompt in our own LLM for go-to-market partners and actually be able to get some of these answers and get a recording or so and seeing how that actually works. So it could take away from us repeating ourselves over and over again, but actually be in like, okay, well, did that help? Did that not help? How could we help? The question, Dave, that people are not asking, and I hope this is what people get out of this conversation is, what's not going to change for your customer? Nobody's going to say, hey, can you send me stuff a little bit slower? Nobody's going to say that. Or can you increase the price of these things? People are going to always want cheaper, better, faster things. So if we all can actually think about everything as a business owner, from that lens, what can I do that our customers would never change? Doesn't matter AI or not. AI is going to be, quite frankly, literally a small enabler of all of it. It will be part of everything. But if business owners, and we tell that to our customers all the time, what is it that's not going to change in your customer's mind? What is it? And they would come back to the same 3 things. better, faster, cheaper. I'm like, all right, just focus on that. And now figure out how AI can help you do those things. Not the other way around where, well, what can AI do? No, that's the wrong question. Like that's where you go and start again looking at horses and different types of horses and ponies and all of it stuff, as opposed to saying, no, maybe the client doesn't need horses. They want to get to point A to point B faster. Oh, automobile makes sense, right? Like, but people are asking the wrong questions. Well, how can my horse look better? Like, it does not matter. Absolutely has nothing to do with the reality of what your customers want. So I feel like that should be the question.
No, that's great. I mean, how do I make my horse look better? That's a perfect metaphor.
Yeah.
The way that
You're giving me the idea for the next book now. So I literally
right.
wrote, I've been saying this in
I want to at least write the
conversations.
forward on this. So, and I think that I puzzle sometimes as a hard marketer. I mean, my entire career is marketing and much of your career is marketing. And when we first started this B to SMB Institute, one of the topics that we had on our agenda, and we got some absolutely fabulous chief product officers and chief development officers to talk about it, was the idea that engineering sometimes in the creation of products and tools and capabilities gets in front of marketing and actually takes the initial territory of describing what it is and what it does. And my premise as a begrudging marketer was, boy, that sure does mess things up for marketers, because now we have to go and unexplain everything that the engineers have tried to impart to people about what a product does. In the case of AI, do you see that kind of those simple questions and those simple value propositions, benefit statements, are as important in the early development stage as they are in the final kind of go-to-market marketing stage?
You know, what's fascinating is this is really true, and we're seeing this all over. Initially, Dave, I think we're all accustomed to having product innovation happen maybe on a quarterly, twice, 3 times, 4 times a year. Even at Salesforce, at my experience, I would remember Mark Benioff, literally, I was like, how does a $10 billion company have a singular message at Dreamforce? Like, how do they do that? So I literally stayed at Salesforce to learn, to really become a student again. And it was awesome, fascinating. Mark Benioff would literally, around, I think, after the Dreamforce, I think they do it in October, he would go back to his Hawaii, to his island and all that. And he would read 20 different books and think about what's going on. And then he would come up with some sort of message. Then he will bring his executive team and start testing that message with them, with some customers. Then that will layer to the second layer. By the time February comes in, he has clarified and crystallized what is this message going to be. So at that time, I think when I was over there, the message was customer success platform. That's what Salesforce was trying to focus on, is how do we help our customers? We should be the next customer success platform. And then he will use Dreamforce, which is supposed to happen in October, 8 months from now. He will all right, that's what we're doing. That's what we're all about. So product team, go build the product now. CS, go ahead and think about how we make customers successful and have stories around it. Marketing, create positioning around all of it. And that's how we'll galvanize the whole company around that one singular message, with the forcing function of that event, because they have to now show results and show products and show customers and all of that stuff. I'm fascinatingly seeing companies are able to launch new products in terms of features at a speed that we have never seen before. So a classic use case of AI that most people are not thinking through or haven't really gotten there is your AI creating products for yourself. So imagine this, Dave. Let's say you have 1,000 customers today. And if you can actually build a proper AI prompt around this stuff, you'd actually go and ask all right, what are all my 1,000 customers doing and how are they using our products? What services they're using? What other things they're using? If you have a snippet of code that could be on their website or be part of their workflow, then you will identify okay, they're actually taking our data, putting it in a spreadsheet, and then putting it over there. You would the AI should be able to figure out what are the 8 other things these folks are doing that you can actually do, and then you can go back and say, all right, let's build this. So AI will actually recreate a prototype of that solution, test it with a few customers, hey, we just enabled this thing because we see that you constantly take data, put it in a spreadsheet, do that. Now you click a button, it will automatically populate the spreadsheet for you. Boom. So your product just created a product that you can actually sell to your existing customer. That's a new level of innovation with the product itself. You don't have to go to Hawaii on a beach to figure out what to do. You add your product, which would be pretty awesome. You can go to Hawaii to talk about what happened with customers, but your AI, if you use that and keep asking the question, what does our customer want? Like that's where it should start from. And then you would actually say, what does our customer do? What do they do with our product? What do they do in addition to our product? Who do they want to integrate our product? What do they do by taking the data from our product and put in what? To do what? Like if you start asking these questions, you're going to find out the right use case for your AI. Back to it is if your focus is on how is our customer using or what problem they're trying to solve, it sounds rudimentary, but that question, that's why me and Brian, when we were to the book, we won't ever change these questions because we had so many other questions and we'll boil it down to 4. And these 4 questions are directional questions. These questions are meant to make you think about how do you solve business problem. And now if with AI, you should be able to solve it faster, not change questions. The questions will never change. The answers and how you get there will change.
Fascinating. And I think that what to me is exciting about what you're unlocking is the whole idea that your offering future exists within your knowledge of your customers, the knowledge you can extract from your customers. And that's, you don't have to go out into a complete blue ocean, white space to, come up with things. Just turn inwards and ask AI to go look at your customers. And amazing things will be found. So let's talk a little bit about something that stood out for me in the book, was this idea that in a go-to-market, as you're expanding, really as you're building, but as you're expanding too, that the idea that marketing should always be attempting to beget communities, that affinities of people growing, of working together, understanding each other. It's really kind of the romantic side of segmentation, right?
Yeah.
That's all. Let's jam these people together so we can target them easier. No. Let's get them together so that they can actually talk to each other and enrich us as the product seller. So talk about the role that communities play in something that's a little bit more abstract right now, at least. But how does it play a role in AI?
I've always said this. You may have heard me say this before, that without a community, you're simply a commodity.
Mm-hmm.
And people need to really, really get a hold of it. I'll never forget this. HubSpot, they were one of our first investors in my last company, Terminus. They created a fund and they were trying to invest in some companies, and we were one of the first companies they invested in. And I had an opportunity to spend time with both Brian Halligan and Dharmesh Shah, the founders of HubSpot. And I went and met them. They actually are one of the people who actually quoted on the back of the book, Brian Halligan. And I remember, I'll never forget this. I asked them, why are you still building inbound? It's been 10 plus years. You guys have all the momentum. Why even call it inbound? Why are you not calling it HubSpot so-and-so? I'll never forget this, Dave. They said, look, if somebody out there today is trying to build a faster, better, cheaper, going back to the same 3 principles, product right now. And we have no doubt that our product could be built faster, cheaper, better than whatever we're doing. Somebody is trying to outbid us right now every single day. And there's a healthy skepticism that every founder, CEO, leader should have in order to be a little bit on the edge and making sure you're sharp enough to think about the future. But he said, here is the thing. He said, Sangram, our community is our moat, M-O-A-T, like moat. Our moat is so big that if somebody wants to compete with us, they will have to literally crawl over a 20,000 raving fans wall and to jump over and try to get to our product. They're not even getting to our product because our fans are so big and so far-reaching and so deep. So they looked at community as their moat, their strategic, their competitive advantage more than anything else. So organizations who think community is not necessarily the thing that they need to do, I can just give you a few more examples. Think about Salesforce. We talked about Salesforce. Salesforce does reinforce. Why is that? You think about HubSpot does inbound. At Terminus, we did Flip My Funnel. Gainsight does Pulse. And, Outreach acquired a community called Sales Hacker to be part of their community to make it out. So if you really start thinking about a product company by itself is not something that somebody's going to get excited about. Everybody wants to be part of a movement. They want to be part of a solution. And if you can figure out a way to bring them along to say that, hey, we don't have a perfect answer right now, but we will figure it out. And we are as committed as anybody else to figure out and solve the problem. Do you want to join this with me? And people would do whatever it is. Even though the product is not doing well, people will give you a pass. That's what happened to us in the early days at Terminus. That's what happened to HubSpot. They were about to shut down almost if you go and read some of the early days of HubSpot, until they acquired another company that fixed their marketing automation. They were in the la la land. They had thousands of people who were downloading and getting their website grader thing, but they didn't have any revenue. Their churn was through the roofs. And they couldn't make things work until they figured out this one thing. But the reason they were able to still raise money and keep things going in the pursuit of figuring it out is because they had this incredibly amazing community that backed them up. So back to this whole idea of AI is not going to help you build a community. AI is not going to help you build one-to-one relationship. AI is going to make you smarter about how to execute on all the things that comes in and around a community. For example, if you want to do an event together, AI should be able to create a landing page, create follow-ups, take every conversation you have from it, turn it into proper transcripts, turn them into videos, share. All of these things should be able to be done. But should we do an event or not? That is going to be all the way, Dave. You have to make that decision every year. Should we do this event or not? No, you're not going to rely on any AI bot to tell you should do that event. There's a lot of data, but there's a lot of in your own personal gut feeling about how you feel and why you do what you do that come through with the event that you put together. And that's the big distinction between this.
Yeah. And I think that tapping, again, we're reinforcing this idea that within your users, within your customers, within your allies, your partners is AI helps you extract all this incredibly great, rich information that points out affinities and common threads and, what we used to call in segmentation, the bumps. Where are the bumps? Where are the, areas where, they're all this, all of the people who shop when I was at Toys R Us, all the people who shop in our plush department are this. And they're not just this, they're this at this particular moment in time. Yeah. And so we started to realize that, it is better to capture a target in the form of a moment of need than it is a particular profile.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, of all the ways in which we would have used AI, throughout my career to really kind of establish, this is what it is. Instead, we ran out, we did focus groups. We kind of led with our gut and said, we think what we're hearing is this. And sometimes we were right and sometimes we were god awful wrong. But AI is this incredible partner and agent in extracting the value that you have within your own customer basis. Even though I hate the word agent, I think I mentioned this to you last time. I think that the marketer and the copywriter in me there's too much baggage with that. I wish there was a nicer, more friendly word to that. But
that's no different than, I think we talk like Elon Musk, this Cybertruck. I mean, there's no woman involved no matter what. Like you could say that this must be some Stone Age people sitting somewhere and drawing that on and saying overnight, let's ship this thing. I mean, it looks like, oh my gosh, I would never want to park that, but it has this interesting feel to it.
Yes, and it's funny because it's a shame that the windows are tinted, because whenever I pass one on the interstate, I'm always looking over going, okay, fulfill my imagination of who this really actually is that bought this thing and is driving it. So when you look at the AI market and the B2B companies that you work with, my gosh, is it noisy right now?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just incredibly noisy. So, differentiation is marketing 101. How do you really draw out that conversation and give that good advice on how to differentiate your offering and your go-to-market in this incredibly noisy space that we're in right now?
Oh, it's super noisy. There are lots of Me Too's. For example, I'll give you a really interesting example. A few days ago, I was looking for what is an AI tool out there today that can just create draft responses to all my emails. So I just need to review them and send it, as opposed to even having a virtual assistant do that. Because it can look at all my emails and knows my style and knows how I do it. There should not be an issue of for an AI tool to be able to do it. I saw this tool and I was like, that's interesting. And I use Superhuman as a email tool that actually does a lot of other things. 2 days later, they send me an email saying that's what Superhuman is going to do. And I was just thinking, oh my gosh, there's this AI company who raised a lot of money, who just built this interesting tool around how emails can be done. And now Superhuman already did it. Before you know it, I'm sure Gmail will have it. So the cost of product innovation is gone down significantly, where products can be innovated like that. You have a problem, there should not be a whole lot of time figuring out. What's interesting, if you want to think about positioning, is one, community is a big part of positioning. Like, can you position yourself as a thought leader while community is like, I want to be part of that tribe. Like those are my people. Like, so that's going to be a huge part of differentiation, not something that you would see in the 4 Ps, but the positioning around community is super, super important. The second part that I think most people miss out is this idea and the thought around thinking about life and work in decades, not days. Most times, a lot of these tools that are they're like days worth of thinking gone in there. There's not decades worth of thinking. So the guy who put together or gal who put together this tool that does email replies, that's what their end result was. That's what they were trying to build. There wasn't a futuristic world that they were thinking about, because they were just using an AI thing. Oh, it would be really cool to have emails. They build that. Boom. Now what? Like, there's nothing futuristically thinking. So you need to be thinking about whatever you build in decades. And that's a long form thinking in the world of short form, everything that we get, the instant gratification. So the decades over days. So community over commodity, decades over day. And the third one I would say is this idea of all in versus in all, meaning you are all in on that one thing that actually is going to change the world. And you would look at everything with that, as opposed to you're in all things and all of a sudden you have very little incremental value to provide, because you're just a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, but don't really have a big point of view. So if you're creating a point of view, if you're thinking through it, we highly recommend people to use these 3 different lenses. Community over commodity. Do you have a way to build that? And there are like 10 different ways to do it. What you're doing is a phenomenal way to do that, right? Second is, whatever you're solving, would you bet a decade on it? Not a few days, but actually a decade on it. And then that requires a evangelistic view of what you're trying to solve for. And the last is like, are you all in on that one? Because if you're not all in, then you're going to get distracted by shiny new object. Oh, new horse, great, I'm running after it, right? You don't need a new way to kind of put on something underneath the horse for it to make a better sound, or you still will never create a faster horse than the fastest horse that's there. So you have to keep looking at these 3. So point of view is super interesting, but it's not what people think. It's not another feature set. It's not another way of just saying the same thing. It's literally your community, your ability to think about problems that you're trying to solve for your customer in decades, and you literally are all in on that one. And when you start looking at, well, who are the architects for that? You think about Steve Jobs. Nobody could imagine him doing anything but Apple. You think about Mark Benioff. Nobody can imagine him doing anything but Salesforce. You think about, and you just go down this rate, like Mother Teresa. You cannot imagine her doing anything but what she did, right? So you start looking at people, or Oprah. Like, if you are a fan of any of them, you just look at all these people, and Elon, they're just doing things, and they're all in on that one, and they're building a huge community around it, and they are thinking in decades. And that is how you create a point of view that's worth following.
That's just terrific, absolutely terrific. And I'm thinking back at my own career, when those things that were the most successful were the things that really adhered to those 3 principles. And whether it was CarMax, whether it was the reinvention of Toys R Us in the form of the Times Square store, whether it was BizHive, all those things basically were very much I wasn't so conscious of it either, but consciously we're looking back at it now, no, boy, this really was a long game. We were playing a real long game, and what we were able to reinvent from a market perspective, never been done before, but the world needed it. Which is one of the classic questions in all of retail. Does the world really need a fill in the blank, when it came to retail, success or failure? So last two questions, because, and I'll use this as a setup. I was talking to a CEO friend, good friend for many, many years of a $1 billion plus company. And we were talking about AI, and he jokingly said, AI was the new seat at the executive committee table. And I laughed and I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, no, really, I'm serious. He said, AI has become, I can look around the table and see all the departments represented, all of the kind of work streams, workflows, work assignments, responsibilities represented around my executive committee table. I feel like we need to pull up a chair for AI. And because AI has such an incredibly outsized impact on everything that we're doing right now. And I said, that's really interesting. So when it comes to the implementation of AI, does it create unification? Does it create fragmentation? I mean, fragmentation is never good in any organization, of course, but I mean, how do you see what has always been a really critical principle on your part is that you got to get alignment, you got to get alignment, you got to get alignment. How does AI impact that?
Yeah. I think I would seriously contest the idea of having a seat at the table with somebody in the AI shoes, because then you're again delegating this idea of thinking about how do you solve problems to a person who manages a barn, right? Like, like, hey, your job is to take care of the barn. And the reality is like, no, you probably don't need a barn altogether. Like, I cannot get this analogy any further. I feel like I'm just going to continue to put myself in that shoes, because it's everybody's responsibility. It's the internet. Like, you don't have a head of internet sitting at the table saying, well, here's how. No, everybody needs to learn how to use internet. Everybody needs to figure out how to use internet in your own way. So the AI is the same thing. It's like everybody just need to figure out how you do better, faster things for your customers.
Right.
And that is not something that could be put on somebody else's shoulder, like a chief technology officer or something like that. I think that would actually make it, it will add a layer of bureaucracy in the process that I don't think you want. And no matter what size company you are, I'm talking to CEOs of billion-dollar company who are sitting in AI prompt in ChatGPT, figuring out what prompts to create. So you can't tell me that there is one of the person sitting at the chair whose whole responsibility is on, like, there's no way. So that's
a great answer. I wish you'd been there for that conversation.
Yeah, like I would seriously contest and have a fun conversation around it, because we're all figuring it out. So there's no, but that's how I would contest it.
Yeah.
But you at your event, maybe you should do something like, hey, people who think like this versus that, and I'll be happy to be on one side and have a debate that will be lively and exciting.
No, I think that's a great idea. Definitely. There's so many type A personalities at our events that there's no shortage of people with an opinion. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And then you go get drinks later on. Like, that's just life, how it should be.
Yeah, exactly. Last question. So, and I think you're absolutely right to say, look, the four questions fundamentally have not changed. 5 years have passed, maybe, or 4 years, but the questions haven't changed. In fact, they're even more important than ever, really, in the context of something as revolutionary as the internet is now amongst us, is now infusing everything that we do. If you had the opportunity to add a fifth question or a fifth letter to move, what would it be? I mean, and I'll only make this one observation. You do such a great job of being grounded and yet future forward in your thinking.
Thank you.
And so what if you had to look at the vitality or the impact, the import of your message in that kind of century, a decade, not a day, what would it be?
When we started on this journey of writing the book Move, I had a chip over my shoulder. I think I shared that with you in the very first conversation I had, because I thought, well, I built to, 100 million plus exit companies, I kind of know what go-to-market is. And the more time I spent with people like Brian Halligan and VCs that had like $1 billion exits and all of it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm an idiot. I do not know what I do not know. And I had to go back to being a student to it. And initially we had about 51 questions that we were asking every one of these people. And after about 7th or 8th interview, and we had about 200 people we interviewed, and about 7th or 8th interview, it became clear that everybody's asking some level of the same 4 questions that ended up becoming the move. And thankfully, I'm a framework guy, so God blessed me with this idea of like, something that like move that just makes sense.
Right.
You want to figure out your next move, right? And we had so many great questions that kept popping up, and like things like experience. Should we add 2 E's to it, right? Or there was a set of questions that were more around how do we create, should we as S, like a strategy, like, moves. And there was all these things that were clear.
I bet.
And over again, I had this conversation with Brian, my co-founder, and we looked at it. I'm like, no, we wouldn't add a single additional question, because the idea is that simplicity scales and complexity fails. Time and time again, we all have seen it. So to make it more complex, to make it more complete, even if the complete is the right thing, completion never helps. Clarity always helps. So move is more clear what questions you should be asking to solve for your business than actually giving people more questions to now wrestle with. They already have enough questions, enough problems to wrestle with. So we don't want to add more to it. We actually want to simplify it. So what I'm looking at is how do I take a letter out more than to put it in? Because people do not have the ability to have more things to work through. People actually need to have more simplified way to try to say, well, what is the most minimal, most specific thing I can do to get the maximum throughput? We're all wired to think about it that way. And even if it gets to you 80% of the way, you're fine than having nothing or having 50 other questions. So my way of looking at this thing is always like, how can I make it even less? How can I make it a letter if I could? If you would, that's the way I think AI should make you think about this. How do I make it shorter and simpler? Like there's a phrase somebody said a long time ago that says, look, if I had more time, I would write shorter letters. And you being a copywriter, I'm sure you know that, right? If you have more time, you would write less words, because that's what impact is, not more words. The same thing applies to these principles.
Absolutely fantastic. This is one of those where I knew it was going to be fantastic coming into it. It's exceeded all of my wildest expectations. I can't tell you how excited I am to hear you talk at our event. There's so much more to talk about, and I will just honor you and praise you for being an evangelist on behalf of all of us marketers, and really providing kind of the clarity and the inspiration to get go-to-market right, because that is one of the things that as marketers we're sometimes we're sometimes behind the curve on what the go-to-market actually was decided to be. And we're like left picking up the pieces. But
we have the highest responsibility to try to make the best we could. So I'm honored and excited to be part of this movement that you're creating, Dave.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, listen, thanks very much. Have a great rest of the day, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this episode of Between2Bs, the official podcast of the B2SMB Institute and our 5,000 plus business to small business professionals. Tune in every Wednesday for new episodes at the crossroads of the big B and the small B. Between2Bs on your favorite streaming services.